I'm Amy Pilgrim. Thanks for streaming with us. Week 4 of testimony in the Sean Combs sex trafficking trial, picking up with a more aggressive cross-examination of Diddy's former assistant, who's going by the name of Mia in court. Prosecutors called the defense tactics harassing and humiliating, saying they feared it could have broader implications for victims in other cases. The defense asking Mia if she hired a lawyer last year because she wanted to join the Me Too money grab against Combs. The judge sustained an objection. Now, Mia told the jury Combs repeatedly sexually assaulted her and brainwashed her. The defense also grilled her about a nightmare involving R. Kelly, where she dreamt Combs came to her rescue, to which the defense attorney asked, "The person who sexually assaulted you came to your rescue, correct?" Mia answered, "Yes." Combs has denied all allegation. There are a lot to get to today, including longtime competitor Suge Knight speaking out about the case from behind bars, why he doesn't consider Combs a rival, plus Suge's message for Diddy tonight. We begin with ABC News Chief Investigative Correspondent Aaron Kotursky live outside the federal courthouse here in Manhattan. And Aaron, Combs' former assistant Mia back on the stand for cross-examination. At this point, she's been on the stand for many hours of testimony. What did she say?
I think her cross-examination lasted 2 full days, Eva, and you could tell the jury, I think, was getting a bit exasperated with it. Some were smirking at times or giving odd glances, laughing or passing notes with one another during breaks. But Mia was confronted with years of her flattering social media posts that called Sean Combs legend or mentor, and all of these loving text messages that showed she stayed in touch with him for 6 years after she left her job in 2017, a job at which she says Sean Combs sexually assaulted her on repeated occasions, which he denies. And so the defense was trying to show that these messages of love and support that she sent almost routinely were at odds with her depiction of her working conditions.
The prosecution accused defense attorney Brian Steele of yelling at Mia, using a sarcastic tone and being argumentative. You were inside the courtroom. What did the judge say?
Yeah, at one point, Brian Steele suggested that Mia was just out for money on the Me Too money grab, as he called it, or he suggested that Mia simply made up her accusations of being subjected to physical and sexual violence. And Mia had none of it. She said, "I have never lied in this courtroom and I never will." And during a break outside of the jury's presence, Prosecutor Maureen Comey stood up and said that this cross-examination was humiliating for Mia, and said that it bordered on harassment and being argumentative, and that it would deter victims in other cases from coming forward. Judge Arun Subramanian said he did not see it that way. He did not see Brian Steele, the defense attorney, being argumentative, though he did caution Steele about the tone and tenor of some of his questions.
There was one point Mia said that she lied to Cassie and said she only lied when forced by Combs. How did the jury appear to react to what Mia had to say today?
Yeah, some may have been skeptical. It's so hard to read the jury, Eva, but this was an interesting line of argument, because Brian Steele took pains to point out the relationship that Mia said she had with Cassie Ventura. She said it was sister-like. And then Steele questioned, well, were you keeping things from your sister, Cassie Ventura, and would you lie to her? And Mia said that she would keep things from her if Sean Combs forced her to. And so you got this sense that she was struggling to be maybe loyal to Combs and keep things that could be damaging from someone she considered a sister, but I think the defense meant to try to call her character into question.
We also heard from another witness, someone at the Beverly Hills Hotel. That wrapped in about 20 minutes. What did she tell the jury?
Yeah, she was the last witness of the day, and it returned the jury to one of the central focal points of the prosecution's case, and that's the freak-offs, these sex performances that went on that left hotel rooms often in disarray. And this one particular hotel worker from the Beverly Hills Hotel showed the jury a couple of bills with extra charges to clean the drapes, and one to clean up excessive amounts of oil that earned Combs a $500 miscellaneous charge. Federal prosecutors had said, and witnesses have testified, especially Cassie Ventura, that baby oil was everywhere after those hotel stays.
Aaron Katersky, thank you so much. And joining us now is ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer to break it all down for us. Okay, week 4 of testimony is here. Who are we expecting to hear from this week?
So Mia is officially done and no longer on the stand. We saw direct cross-examination, and then now she's done. What we expect now is we saw one person by the name of Eddie Garcia. He's a former employee of the Intercontinental Hotel. Now, he received immunity from the government, okayed by the judge. My expectation is he's going to have something to do, perhaps, with why that video never made it to the public. Maybe he accepted a bribe. We know that's one of the underlying charges. And then more witnesses testifying, going back to that video of the Intercontinental Hotel, maybe an expert who's going to tell us about how that video came about.
We also heard the defense attorney really peppering Mia, asking her questions about these seemingly positive posts that she made about Sean Combs. The prosecution really pushed back on that line of questioning. What did they say?
Yeah, so a number of things. They're saying that she was being harassed, that this was embarrassing. But the major point that came out was that their concern is that if this victim is not protected from further harassment, then others will be deterred to come forward in other cases. Now, was this the most contentious and most heated cross-examination of this case? Yes. Absolutely. But of any case, or even cases that involved sexual assault and cross-examining alleged victims, no. You're talking about Brian Steele. When it comes to him, like, reading the quotes of curses, he spells them out. He's apologizing to her. Yes, does he have a certain tone about him? But no, I don't think it rose to the level of this.
It was more intense, though. How does she seem to be handling it?
So she seemed to be handling it very well overall, but she did have points of her cross-examination where she would struggle to understand what was going on. She would hesitate to answer. And Brian Steele really hopped on that in terms of trying to press her more and more. Now, I think a reasonable interpretation of this would be Cassie is still in the middle, Mia is still in the middle of trying to build herself back after all these alleged abuse and violence. Very different than Cassie, who had more time to process it. But another reasonable interpretation is she's being evasive. She's hiding things. And so I think at the end of the day, it's going to be up to both the defense and the government to put together a summation to explain the reason why she testified the way she did.
I have to ask you, because we've heard a name several times throughout this trial, D-Rock. That's Sean Combs' bodyguard. Where is D-Rock? Are we going to hear from D-Rock during this trial?
I've got to imagine the answer is yes. We heard about him from Capricorn Clark, from Mia, from Cassie. This is one of the security guards that are associated with Sean Combs. And if you're going to try to prove a RICO conspiracy case and this inner circle that existed, I'm assuming you're going to get someone from this inner circle. And I got to assume it's D-Rock based on how many people have talked about his involvement in the various allegations in this case.
Brian Buckmeyer, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Selecting a jury can be a difficult process for any trial, but a high-profile case like this can easily make it next level. Joining us now is jury consultant Alan Turkheimer to give us an inside look at how a jury may handle a case like this. And while he isn't a part of the team working on this case, he has been a jury consultant for other high-profile trials. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to dive right in. What does it take to seat a jury in a trial like this one?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. It takes certain questioning during the voir dire process. It takes making sure the jurors, even though they know about this case, making sure that they have the fortitude to put any kind of preconceived notions aside and be fair and objective and impartial when they see the evidence that's going to come forward. And there were a lot of safeguards in place, certainly ones that are more in favor of the defendant in a case like this, a criminal case. And yes, there's this whole high-profile media aspect to it. And so both sides have to think, all right, once we seat the jurors, and remember, they're also alternates, but they have to decide, okay, once we seat the jurors, they're going to be in it for the long haul, and then we have to go with what we have.
I heard from our reporters in court that the jury has been a lot more expressive today than earlier in the trial. They seem to be passing notes to each other, laughing at certain moments. How can these reactions impact a trial?
It was interesting about the notes, because if you think about it, where in life do you see testimony, hear from witnesses, see evidence, and lawyers questioning witnesses, and then you can't say a word about it? It's really difficult. So the jurors are on breaks talking to each other about their lives, talking about what they're ordering for lunch, talking about anything that has nothing to do with the trial. That's what they're said to do by the judge. So they're bonding, they're getting to know each other. Certain dynamics are formed. Certain jurors maybe are even becoming leaders on the breaks. So when they actually start the deliberations, even though they will not have spoken about the case at all, they're going to be ready to talk and they're going to know each other pretty well. So it's interesting that the dynamic is already taking shape because it is so hard not to talk about the case, let alone a case like this with all this riveting and gruesome testimony, with all these images and all this hideous testimony that's coming on with these victims in the case.
There are also, when you look at this jury, there's twice as many men as there are women, 8-4 to be exact. How does a gender split like this play into a sex trafficking case such as this one?
Not sure that it does, but it seems like maybe one of the sides did, depending on how they use their strikes. So maybe, as you're talking about earlier, going after some of these victims on the stand when Mia was on there, maybe the defense thinks that some of these male jurors are going to be receptive to the strategy that they're employing with cross-examination. It's hard to know exactly, but it is interesting. I would say that 8-4, probably not a mistake, but it could be, or just coincidence. Now, if it was 9-3 or 10-2, then there would probably be one side looking for one gender or the other. But it is interesting to note, absolutely.
When the defense begins to present their case, which is not going to be for a while, what should we be paying attention to when it comes to the jury?
It's going to be really hard. They've dug themselves in a hole, or at least the prosecution's done a very effective job. Jurors do not typically forgive what is unforgivable. Now, you might have some jurors that at the end of the day will say, yeah, these are gruesome acts. This is horrible. He's a horrible person, but they don't fit with what Sean Combs is being charged with. But for the most part, jurors will be outcome determinative. So if you're the defense, you have to really hope there's one or two jurors that can hold firm and say that at the end of the day that, yeah, these are horrible things that happened, but the prosecution did not hold its burden. And so we can't find that that he should be convicted beyond a reasonable doubt.
Alan Turkheimer, thank you so much for being with us. Coming up, the legal strategy behind the defense's cross-examination of Combs' former assistant and why the prosecution accused the defense of humiliating a witness. Also ahead, co-founder of Death Row Records, Suge Knight, speaks to ABC News from behind bars. Stay with us. Welcome back to Burden of Proof, the case against Diddy. Let's jump right into the breakdown for the legal strategies we saw playing out in court. Brian Buckmeyer is here playing the defense, Bernardo Villalona playing prosecutor. Brian, we're going to start with you, the defense attorney. Okay, the prosecution really felt like he was pushing Mia today. What did you think of his cross?
Yeah. His name is Brian Steele, former public defender. He is zealously advocating for his client, and he's making a point of saying Mia is a liar. Okay, the prosecution doesn't like it, but he stayed well within the bounds of what a defense attorney should do. And if we're comparing his cross-examination of alleged victims to other sex trafficking, other sex abuse, other rape cases, he's actually pretty gentle. We're talking about a defense attorney that when he's quoting someone who's cursing, he spells it out. He doesn't say curse word. He apologizes. He's pretty much a gentleman in many regards. They just don't like how loud he got at some points.
Brian, do you think the issue that it should have been a female that was cross-examining Mia instead of Brian Steele?
I think a woman would have gotten more leeway in terms of the sarcasm and the raising his voice, but I think he toed the line pretty well, and I don't think he went overboard. Even the judge says, I don't see anything wrong with what he's doing, but I do think that he should change the format of his questions.
The prosecutors would have prepped Mia for cross, so do you think they prepped her for what this was going to be like?
Oh, absolutely. I think the prosecution definitely prepped Mia for cross. I think Mia wasn't ready for cross-examination by a male, by a person like Brian Steele, who is very advanced. So in terms of prepping her, they prepped her and met with her 27 times. I have never in my career met with a witness 27 times. As a prosecutor for 13 years, 16 years, as a defense attorney, there's no reason for me to meet with a witness for 27 times. But I think because she is a delicate witness, that she's now starting to embrace the trauma and the psychological trauma that she's had been dealing with, that we're seeing and we're witnessing happening right before our eyes. Very different than when Cassie testified, because Cassie had been getting psychological help for many years.
Well, and then the prosecutor raised the question with the judge about this could keep other victims from coming forward in other cases, not even this case, a different case. Did you think there was any relevance to that?
Oh, absolutely. You have to think, because this case and the magnitude of this case, of people that are watching the case inside of the courtroom, outside of the courtroom, on TV, on social media, on podcasts, and the magnitude of it, that even though her name is as a pseudonym, as testifying Knight as Mia and not her real name, they are paying attention to the type of scrutiny that she is getting inside of the courtroom as well as outside of the courtroom. Again, you know, arguing from the prosecutor's side.
But you could say that of the Harvey Weinstein case, the R. Kelly case, every case. And we've seen the cross-examination in those cases. And if you want to compare those crosses to what Brian Steele did, he's still the lighter touch of everyone else we've seen.
I agree. It's a lighter touch, because if I would have cross-examined her, it would have been so much more brutal.
When you look at how Cassie Ventura, for instance, was cross-examined, these are very different ways of questioning a witness.
Well, you had two different attorneys.
I also think the fact that with Mia, there is no actual evidence of even assault or abuse. But with Cassie, there's the video. You can't cross-examine Cassie and say, well, you've never been assaulted and you never reported at a certain time, or you didn't talk about sexual assault or sexual abuse until some 7 months after speaking with the prosecutor or after a period of time when Cassie filed her lawsuit. So you have to handle them
The huge difference is the corroboration. Just as Brian said, with Cassie, there's a lot of corroboration in the sense that you have other witnesses. So you have the escorts as well as people who did see her injured. You have that intercontinental video.
Pictures
you have
of bruises?
text messages. You have pictures of bruises. So that you have the corroboration. The problem that the prosecution is encountering with Mia is that you don't have corroboration. You don't have the text messages. You don't have the pictures. You don't have the video. In the sense that Brian Steele focused his cross-examination on, look, the Instagram posts and your messages that we have are all lovey-dovey. Nothing has to deal with you being abused or seeing someone abused or you being sexually assaulted at all.
Well, and she says at one point today that she was brainwashed, Brian. What do you make of that?
So this is the difficulty of doing this job sometimes. Do we understand the abuse that a person can go through and the brainwashing of them being almost controlled and manipulated to the point of, if they speak out, they get yelled at, they get abused, they get sexually assaulted, all of that? Do we understand what Dr. Hughes said in earlier testimony and how that can apply to Mia as well? Yes, but her answer was muddled and all over the place. Brian Steele did a very good job of saying, okay, you said there wasn't a lot of support in the Me Too movement, but after that happened, 2 years later, or 3.5 years later, you're still sending lovey-dovey messages. After all of this, you're still doing all of these things that you're saying weren't there and that's why you didn't come forward. To a jury, that might be a little bit difficult than what I'm saying.
But you still have the lack of motive. So in a sense of she's not getting any money for testifying. It's not like there's a show deal that's waiting for her. She has nothing to gain at the end because she's not suing Sean Combs. So that works in the prosecution's favor, that she's coming forward because she was truly someone that was victimized. So that's going to be their argument to a closing argument.
We're going to have to leave it right there. We're out of time. Thank you both for being with us. Coming up, Suge Knight has been mentioned at least 50 times in this trial. When we come back, what the rapper told ABC News from behind bars. Welcome back. As testimony enters week 4 in the Sean Combs sex trafficking case, tonight we are hearing from the man viewed by many as Diddy's longtime competitor in the hip-hop world, Suge Knight. The famed founder of Death Row Records spoke to ABC News from behind bars.
I wouldn't quite say we rivaled, because to say we rivaled, that means we had to be really, really bad enemies.
Joining me now is ABC News contributor and DJ Megan Wright. Megan, so good to have you. I'm curious, are you surprised at all to hear Suge Knight say that?
I mean, I am, but is he talking about in 2025? Because if he's talking about in 2025 in today's age, you know, that makes a little bit more sense. But historically speaking, about them not being rivals, that I really don't understand. Because when I think of Suge Knight, when I think of Diddy, you know, and their rivalry on a public stage, I think of the Source Awards in 1995. You know, Source Awards at that time was a very, very important, you know, award show for hip hop culture, in which Suge Knight won an award. He gets on stage and he basically says, look, if you are an artist and you don't want, you know, your executive all up in your videos, you don't want your executive on these tracks, come over to Death Row. You know, so if that's not a rivalry, I'm not really sure, you know, what is. That kind of sets the stage. And then, of course, in the trial, we heard about what almost went down in 2008 when Diddy allegedly, you know, was on his way to Mel's Diner. So to see Suge. So, you know, that's where I get a little confused. But again, Eva, if he's talking about 2025, you know, they're not on the same page. So that could make sense in that aspect.
Yeah, and Knight also had a message for Combs.
He did. And, you know, again, they're not currently in prison for the same thing. but they are both, locked up, and, they both had different parts of them or what they were doing kind of stripped away from them. So let's take a listen to what he had to say.
But I've been there, sitting in those cells. And I know he feel that he don't have a friend in the world. None of them been to court. None of them been to help. So I'm quite sure he's in a lonely place right now.
Yeah, so there's definitely truth to that, and if you think of, from the side of, not speaking in terms of criminally, what is going on with Diddy, but, the white parties, every A-lister that you can think of was at these parties. And now none of those A-listers or B-listers or whatever down the line are anywhere close to this trial. Nobody is showing up for him, whether it's, online or in person. So there is truth to that for sure.
Okay, now apart from this trial, Knight at one point said this toxic culture of abuse wasn't a uniquely Diddy thing, saying it was how things were in the hip hop industry.
Again, Eva, more truth to that, just a very interesting messenger. So let's hear what he had to say.
Don't get me wrong, he did terrible things, but he just didn't come up with those stuff and those ideas on his own. That's why I don't feel that they should take Puffy and lock him up and throw away the key. I think he can do so much good right now. Him telling the truth about the industry.
Again, truth to that, interesting messenger, but at the same time, I don't think anybody's looking, at Diddy to be the voice of reason. He has shown in the past, especially when, the video originally came out, at the hotel with Cassie, that he didn't take accountability for it, so I don't see that changing. And it looks like, I don't know, Eva, it's interesting to see Suge and Diddy in this space together, knowing their history.
Were you surprised that Suge Knight decided to publicly speak about Diddy right now?
No, I do believe that. I think he has a podcast or something. I've heard him speak about things in the past. And of course, he has a long history with Diddy. Whether he's calling it a rivalry or not does not, erase the fact that they have a history that spans almost 30 years. So if anybody would comment on it and people would listen, I believe it, it would be Suge, especially in his current circumstances. There's a lot he can relate to.
Megan Wright, thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome.
And thank you for being with us as well. We'll be back with new episodes every day of The Trial, streaming right here on ABC News Live, Disney Plus, and Hulu, weekdays at 5:30 p.m. Eastern and Pacific. For even more on the Diddy trial, make sure to follow our podcast, Bad Rap, The Case Against Diddy, hosted by our very own Brian Buckmeyer on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'm Eva Pilgrim in New York. Have a great rest of your day.